Hello, and welcome to today's webinar for what is new in TestRail 7.3. My name is John Reynolds, and I will be the host for today's webinar. So before we do begin, I just have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make. We are planning on a 30-minute webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you have to drop out of the webinar or anyone on your team could not make it, you can share with them the recording link. And if they registered, anyone who did register for this webinar will also get a recording link, usually within about 48 hours after the webinar ends. We will be keeping everyone on mute throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A panel. So any questions related to this release, please ask using the Q&A panel, and you can ask them as early as you would like, as we will be answering questions through the panel throughout the entire webinar. So you do not need to wait until the end of the webinar to ask any questions. So the agenda for today is to cover all of the features that are included in the 7.3 release. So this release is an enterprise-focused release. So if you do not have TestRail Enterprise, most of these features will not apply to you. However, this will give you a preview and an insight into what is included in this release in case you are interested in upgrading to TestRail Enterprise. So in this release, we have test case statuses, assignments, comments, and approvals. We have a test case version compare and restore functionality. We made some updates to the to-do area. We also added shared step histories and restore options for shared step changes. We also have some API changes, and then following this agenda, we should have a few minutes to cover some Q&A for any questions that did not get answered through the console. So first, let's take a look at test case statuses and approvals. So in this release, we've now added a new approval process for test cases. Prior to this release, only tests and test runs could be assigned to users. We've now added some more functionality for test cases. You can now assign test cases to people. You can customize statuses to indicate whether a test is ready for testing or needs additional edits. You can also add more statuses, really as many statuses as you need to suit your workflow. We've added a permission for marking test cases as approved for testing, and this will play into some test runs as well. We've added comment functionality for test case versions. So if you are reviewing test case changes and you want to comment on these changes back to your tester or whoever is designing test cases, you can now add comments. And these changes will allow for teams to implement a review process for test cases and ensure your test cases are up to your organizational standards. As I mentioned a moment ago, all of these features are for TestRail Enterprise only. So how do these test case statuses work? Under the administration customizations area, you can configure your test case statuses. These will look similar to just another tab on the administration area for setting statuses, kind of like you would for the test result statuses. We do have a few statuses that's defined out of the box, but you can modify these as needed. However, there must always be one default status and one approved type status. So when a user makes edits to a test case, it will revert to the default status. They can then change the status to another one as needed, but after edits, the test case will revert to the default status. And then the approved status indicates the test has been reviewed and approved and ready for testing. If you do not have permission to approve a test case, then you will not be able to change a test case to approve it yourself. It would need to go to someone who can actually approve a test case. Test cases which are not approved will have a new icon indicating it's a test case draft, and that will be indicated with the square or rectangle with the pencil next to it. And the approvals can be enabled on a per project basis. So if you have If you only need to implement this kind of review process for specific projects, you can do that by editing your project settings. So here is what the test case status area would look like. So inside the customizations area, we just have a couple of options for your test case statuses. You can use the up and down arrows to change the order of how they would appear inside in the drop-down list for changing a status. The green check mark indicates this is an approved status, and then the default status has the default next to it in parentheses. And as I mentioned, you can add and remove any test case status that you need to, as long as you leave one approved and one default status. So in the permissions area, we've added the permission for a test case approval. So it's a simple checkbox to enable a user role to have this approval option. You must have this approval permission in order to change a test case to an approved status. And the workload permissions that are shown here will be discussed later in the presentation, but the approval permission is available for TestRail Enterprise only. The to-do permission you see here will be available for both professional and enterprise, and I'll cover that shortly. In a project, so when you go to edit a project as an administrator or project level administrator, you can enable test case approvals for your project. So what this does is it enables test case statuses for your test cases. And also when you create a test run that uses all test cases, this run will only include test cases which are approved. If you want to create runs using non-approved cases, you can create a run using specific filters or dynamic filters to include test cases which are not approved. But with the approval permission, any test run that uses all test cases will automatically exclude anything that is not approved. So you still have some flexibility on the test cases that you include in a test run. So you can include test cases which are in a draft status, but these will also be shown as being a draft test case or not fully approved. In addition to the test case statuses, we've added the ability to assign test cases to users. This is available regardless of whether or not you have an approval setting. So if you have test cases that you just need someone to edit, update, and manage, you can assign those test cases similarly to the way you would assign tests inside test runs. Cases can be assigned individually. You can add a comment and change the status in the same dialog. You can also assign test cases in bulk. For assigning test cases in bulk, you can change the assignee and add a comment. However, if you need to edit the status of multiple test cases in bulk, this would just be done through the bulk edit screen. Email notifications are also enabled for this feature. So when you assign a user a test case, they will receive a notification for that assignment. Similar, when you add comments, a comment notification email will also be triggered. So here is when you're viewing a test case in the right-hand panel, you can see the status and assignee. So you can just change those on the individual test case view using this dialog here. When you're assigning many test cases, you'll see the option to change your assignee and add comments. And comments can also include attachments within the project as well. On to the next release for this, or next feature for this release, we have a test case version compare and restore. So previously in TestRail, we provided just a list of changes over time. So you could expand the details and just show some of the fields that have changed. But this was primarily just in a list format. Now for enterprise customers, we've updated the history page with a few new features. So in addition to that list being present, you can now actually compare any two versions side by side. So instead of just seeing a couple of fields that have changed, you can choose two versions to compare and see highlighted differences in the same screen. This gives you the option to restore an entire previous version. So instead of needing to copy and paste your changes back into your test case, if you want to revert some changes, you can just quickly restore a previous test case version and undo some changes that may have broken some of your tests or caused other issues. You can also restore individual fields from a previous version. So if you only need to restore, say, the test case steps, you can just restore your steps. You do not need to restore an entire version if you need to revert specific changes. This view also includes the comment history for a test case. So since we've now added comments, you can view the comments through the history view. So when viewing the test case history, we've added new buttons. These buttons allow you to do the compare and restore functionality along with the comment history. And as I mentioned, you can also restore a previous version from the history view or when comparing side by side. So you do not need to go into a comparison view. You can also just hit a restore on a previous version from the list in your history view. So here's how the test case history view looks for enterprise. For professional users, you would just not see the compare to, restore, and the comment buttons here. So the comment button, the compare and restore, these buttons would not be present. Same with this comment button here. So we've added these new buttons, which will allow you to compare previous versions side by side. So here is an example of what it looks like when you're comparing two versions. So the text in red, the version on the left is the current version that you have, as noted by the current label here. And you are comparing this to a different version. So anything in red is different from your current test case version. And you can choose to restore the entire test case using the restore button, or you can check individual fields using the checkboxes and restore those fields. For the comment history, so a comment history is going to be pretty straightforward. It will just show you your comment history for an individual version, or you can view the comment history for your entire test case. You can also add comments when viewing your comment history. So to accompany some of the assignments for test cases, we've made some changes to the to-do area. Since the to-do area in TestRail shows you your test case or test assignments within test runs, we've updated the to-do area to also show you your test cases that are assigned to you. So prior to this release, you only saw tests and test runs which were assigned to you or other TestRail users. So with the test case approvals, we've made a few changes to the page. So we've added a new tab view so you can differentiate between test cases and test runs. When approvals are enabled, only test cases which are not approved will appear here by default. You can also set a filter to see test cases with any status, but by default, it will just show you the test cases that are not approved because this would indicate the work that needs to be done. We've also added a new permission for viewing the workloads of other users. So if you want users just to, when they open the to-do page, just to be able to see things that are assigned to themselves, you can change that user permission. This can help if you have a local TestRail instance. This helps reduce some query size on your database if you're concerned about performance, but it's an optional feature. But if you are interested, you can limit what users can see when viewing the to-do area. And the workload permission view for other users is available for both professional and enterprise. So here is the updated to-do area. So we have the test runs and test cases tabs. I've got a couple of filters applied here. So I have these items grouped by status and a filter for just the design and review statuses here. And these show you which test cases are assigned to you or the selected user when viewing the area. You can also click on those test cases to go directly to the work that needs to be done. In addition to updating some of the version history for test cases, we've also added a shared step history for shared test steps, along with restore functionality. So previously, shared test steps did not have any history associated with them. So we've now updated this to include a history view for shared steps. So for both professional and enterprise, we added change histories for shared test steps. This view will be similar to the current, for professional users, the view will be similar to the current view for test cases. So when you view the history, you can just see a list of changes to your shared steps. For enterprise users, we've added a little bit more. We've added the option to compare and restore various or different sets of shared steps. With shared test steps, you can only restore the entire version or entire set of steps. It is not possible at this time to restore individual fields such as a specific step or a specific expected result within a step. So if you need to restore edits to a set of shared steps, you would restore the entire set. So this looks similar to what you would see with test cases when comparing two sets of shared steps side by side. You will just see primarily everything will be highlighted in red, but you can restore or change what you're comparing from this view. Finally, for this release, we have some API changes. So to support some of these additional functionalities, we've added a few API endpoints and made some updates to existing endpoints. So the new endpoints we've added a get case statuses. So this will provide you with the available test case statuses for your test cases. We've also added a get shared step history endpoint to retrieve a history of changes via the API for your shared test steps. The shared step history is available for both professional and enterprise. Some updates to API endpoints. We have added or updated test case endpoints to support assignees and statuses. So all of the new functionality is going to apply to endpoints for getting test cases and updating test cases. When you send a get cases, you can also filter by the test case assignee and status. And the get case history endpoint is where you will be able to retrieve your comments for your test cases. Finally, project endpoints will return the approval setting available. So if you want to know if your project has an approvals enabled via the API, you can your project endpoints will support this setting as well. All right, so that is the functionality that is included in this new release. So we do have some time here to cover some questions and answers, questions asked by customers. So let's look at some of the questions we have here. A question from Richard: can you copy shared steps from one project to another? Currently, the only way to copy shared test steps from one project to another would be to use the API to retrieve your shared steps and then copy them into another project. Another option would be if you have a test case that uses those steps, if you copy that case into another project, you can then create a set of shared steps based on that test case. Then you would have to remove the extra test case, but that would allow you to create a set of shared steps based on existing steps. But there's not a direct way to copy shared steps from one project to another. Another question asked by a couple of people about the changes coming to professional option. At this time, most of the features outlined in this webinar are going to be enterprise only. I did note where some items are professional. However, the majority of the features here are geared towards enterprise licenses. We do have more releases coming out for TestRail soon, which will have some professional features. However, this release is primarily an enterprise release. I'm looking at some more questions here. There is a question from Darren. Does it have the option of generating a customized test report with company logo, specific format, et cetera, after test completion? TestRail does support uploading a custom logo to your instance, which would automatically get added to reports. But that is about as far as the customization options go for reports themselves, without being on a server instance where you can make modifications. So at this time, you can add a logo, but you can't really customize the fonts or add other items to your reports. A question from Helen on when will it be available. So this release is available now for TestRail Cloud. We are working on a release for server to be released soon. However, this is already available for cloud. If you are using server and you want to try out some of these features, you're welcome to start a trial on our cloud instance and just reach out to our support team and ask for the enterprise features to be enabled. A question from April: if we started in professional and migrate to the enterprise version, will we lose our test procedures? No. So if you migrate from professional to enterprise, this is primarily a change in your license. So it does not, we don't go through and modify all of your test data. We just enable the features that are available with enterprise. So you would not lose any other data. A question from Prasad: that can we get a recording of this session? Yes, you should get a recording of the session within about 48 hours after the webinar ends. Anybody who registered will get a link to the recording. Question from Dan: how can I manage track the enterprise feature for which steps are approved versus unapproved? At this time, the approval process for test steps is not available. So the approval process would apply to test cases only at this time. A question from Darren: can we customize, create new test statuses? I agree, Mark, retest specification. Yes, you can create custom statuses for both test results and individual test cases. Both of those are available to administrators in your instance under the customizations area. If you do not receive a link to the recording, just please reach out to our support team, contact@gurac.com, and they should be able to provide you with a link to the recording if for some reason you do not receive a copy. A question from Michael: can a test case have multiple types instead of a single value? To do something like this, you would need to use a custom field, which with a multi-select field to enable multiple types. So this would fall slightly different, but it just require a multi-select field, which is available as a custom field. So you can specify your own custom types as needed. A question from, sorry, I just lost it here. Okay, from Sachin. I hope I did not mispronounce your name here. Any possibility to provide a real-time status on progress being made for test case prep, approved versus design, status test cases? Yes, in the to-dos area, we have the dashboard. So you can look at the to-do page of your project and see which test cases are assigned to whom, and also the various statuses that these test cases are in. So you can see the workloads available or assigned to various users through the to-do page. All right, I have addressed most of the questions that are relevant to this release, I believe. If you have questions pertaining to just TestRail in general that are not necessarily specific to this release, or if you have feature requests, please do submit those to the support team at contact@guroc.com, so they can understand your release and get those into our system as feature requests. All right, I think we only have a couple of minutes left here. If you have any other questions, I'm trying to get to most of them, but I think we are about ready to wrap it up here. If there are any questions that we did not answer live, please, like I said, reach out to our support team, contact@guroc.com for any follow-up questions. And I do appreciate everyone attending today. And if you are interested in enterprise or trialing enterprise, please reach out as well. And thank you everyone for attending.